A very good afternoon to all of you. ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳಾಗಿರುವ ಶ್ರೀ ಬಸವರಾಜ್ ಬೊಮ್ಮಾಯಿ ಅವರೇ, ಮಾನ್ಯ ಲೀಡರ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಪೋಸಿಷನ್ ಹಾಗೂ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮುಂಚಿನ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿ ಆಗಿರುವ ಶ್ರೀ ಸಿದ್ದರಾಮಯ್ಯನವರೇ, ಮೆಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಶ್ರೀಮತಿ ಸುಮಲತಾ ಅಂಬರೀಷ್ ಅವರೇ, ಹಾಗೂ ಶಿವಾಜಿನಗರದ MLA ಆಗಿರುವ ಶ್ರೀ ರಿಜ್ವಾನ್ ಅರ್ಷದ್ ಅವರೇ, ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಟ್ರೇಲಿನ ಎಡಿಟರ್ ಆಗಿರುವ ನೀನಾ ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ಅವರೇ ಹಾಗೂ ಅವರ ಟೀಮ್ನವರೇ, ಇವತ್ತು ನನಗೆ ಭಾಳ ಸಂತಸ ದಿವಸ. ನಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲೇ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಡೈಲಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಾನು ಇವರಿಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಹೃತ್ಪೂರ್ವಕ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸುತ್ತಾ, ನನಗೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರುವ ಟಾಪಿಕ್ಕು ಕೋವಿಡಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋದು. ಅದು ನನ್ನ ಏರಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪರ್ಟೀಸ್, ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಆದರೆ ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋ ಮುಂಚೆ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯ ನಿಮಗೆ ತಿಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಇವಾಗ ಜನರು ಪೇಪರ್ ಓದಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆದರ್ತಾರಂತೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಿದ್ದರಾಮಯ್ಯನವರು ಹೇಳಿದರು. ಅದು ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಟ್ರೂ. ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ಹೌದು ಸರ್, ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ನಾನು ಕೆಲವು ಪೇಷಂಟ್ಸನ್ನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಾಗ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಪೇಪರ್ನವರು ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗೆದು ಇಂಥವರು ಪೇಪರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಆಸ್ಪತ್ರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಪೇಪರ್ ಫೈಲನ್ನು ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ನಾನು, ಅವರ ಕೆಲಸನೇ ಪೇಪರ್ ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಫೈಲ್ ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಏನು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಶೇಷ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅವರ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹರಡುತ್ತಾ? ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು UV ಸ್ಟೆರಿಲೈಸರ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದೀರಾ? ಆ ಪೇಪರ್ ತೆಕ್ಕೊಂಡವರು ಕೈಗೆ ಗ್ಲೌಸ್ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾನ, ಸ್ಟೆರಿಲಿಯಂ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾನ? ಇಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿದರು. ಆದರೆ ನಾನು ಏನು ಹೇಳ ಬಯಸುತ್ತೇನೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ನೀವು ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿಯೂ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಪೇಪರನ್ನು ಓದಿ, ಏನಾಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ನಿಮಗೆ. ನಾನು ದಿವಸಕ್ಕೆ 4 ಪೇಪರ್ ಓದ್ತೀನಿ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ. ಪೇಪರ್ ಕೈಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ತಿದ್ದರೆ ಟೀ ಕುಡಿಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಪೇಪರ್ ಓದೋದನ್ನು ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಬೇಡಿ. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ನೀಡ್ ಟು ಮೇಂಟೈನ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ವೆರಿ ವೆರಿ ರೇರ್ ಫಾರ್ ಪೇಪರ್ಸ್ ಟು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಟ್ ಡಿಸೀಸ್, ಸೊ ಡೋಂಟ್ ಬಿ ವರಿಡ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಇಟ್. ಐ ಆಮ್ ಶ್ಯೂರ್ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಟ್ರೇಲ್ ವಿಲ್ go through a very, very important and encouraging phase in the next few months in spite of COVID. They have a very experienced editor and a great team with Kumaran and others. I wish them the very best. Now, before we come on to the topic of COVID, I would like to talk a little bit about the history of India and Indians. India is a very resilient country. She has conquered famines, plagues, droughts, and floods. The country has survived her greatest challenges because her leaders and the citizens have stepped up. I remember when there was a shortage of food in the 60s during the China War, many of us in smaller towns gave up our meal once a day to serve the nation. I do remember my mom, we were from a middle class family, donated her bangles for the China War. So that was the kind of citizens' engagement we had in this country. And when terrorists attacked Mumbai, we were back on the feet the next day. Our resilience is again being tested today. COVID-19 has managed to eclipse the devastation caused by polio, HIV, SARS, H1N1, Zika, Ebola, and everything, many of these diseases that I have personally seen. Hence, I'm sure over a period of time we'll get over this too, and we'll face a new world very bravely. Now, coming to the topic of COVID, our lives have changed completely following COVID. Lockdowns, curfews, containments, masking, distancing has become the norm, and social activity has come to a standstill, and Zoom meetings become the norm. And what I was quite surprised initially was I got invites for Zoom funerals, which I had never heard of, and that has also become the norm now. People have funerals through Zoom because of the social distancing that has to be maintained. However, every cloud has a silver lining, and there are many lessons that we have learned during the COVID in shaping the healthcare for the future. First and foremost, all of us have realized that a country is only as strong as its healthcare sector is. You might have a mighty army, you might have the biggest economy, but if your healthcare is weak and people are dying like flies during the pandemic, you are not a strong country. And that is what has been shown to the world. And we have seen that the government has also substantially increased the budget for healthcare in the budget this year. and that is, I'm sure, partly because of COVID. It has also highlighted some of the weaknesses of the healthcare system, and that is being rectified, and I would like to specifically compliment the government of Karnataka, which has done a great job in fighting COVID and was considered as a model state for managing COVID in this country. And they have involved the private sector from day one, and a lot of measures were taken during the COVID era, which I'm sure has helped us conquer COVID to a large extent. And we had a wonderful PPP model with the government where every district headquarters hospital was attached to some of the private hospitals, and every morning we'd have meetings between the private hospitals and the district hospital. And this measure alone reduced the mortality of COVID by 50%, and that's a model that was started in Karnataka, and I'm sure it'll continue as long as we need it. One of the major problems we had during COVID and which hurt me the most was there was complete paralysis of healthcare for the non-COVID patients. So patients with heart attacks, cancer, kidney failure, so on and so forth, could not come to the hospitals because travel was a problem. And the hospitals were full with COVID patients, so they had nowhere to go. And a lot of people have died at home, a lot of hardship, and that is something we need to avoid for the future. The future hospital should be designed where we can take care of a pandemic and a non-pandemic care at the same time. And this can easily be done because we have learned a lot of valuable lessons during COVID, and I'm sure we can adopt those for future care of pandemics. And once again, the power of private-public partnership, public-private partnership came to the fore during the COVID. A lot of healthcare, even today in India, is with the private healthcare sector. And we realized during COVID that the government and the private sector should work together, and only then we could conquer COVID. And we had an excellent public-private partnership across the country, especially in the state of Karnataka, which helped us mitigate the burden of COVID. We obviously strengthened the diagnostic setup. When COVID came to this country, we were doing a few hundred tests of RT-PCR a day. And by the time COVID became florid, it was millions of tests a day. And I must compliment both the government and the private sector in getting this done in a very, very short period of time. One of the greatest things that has happened with COVID is the innovation in vaccine technology. What normally took 8 to 10 years to produce a vaccine happened in 8 to 10 months. By the time the second wave hit us hard, we already had vaccines in our country, and now, of course, we have vaccinated a large number of our population, which has probably held us in good stead during now the possible third wave of COVID. And one of the biggest boons, again, was the implementation and acceptance of digital technology. I remember the digital technology was quagmired in legal and other issues for decades together, but 1 week, in the last week of March 2020, it was approved by the government, and now it's a very common phenomena. All of us do video consults and many other remote monitoring through digital technology, and that is here to stay. And that also bridges the gap between the urban and rural areas, and to a large extent, the shortage of personnel, healthcare personnel across the country. What we also realized during the pandemic is that no pandemic in this world cannot be controlled or can be controlled without participation of the public. Without a responsible, sensitive society, we cannot control any pandemics. So my earnest request through the newspaper channel is that please make people aware of COVID-appropriate behavior. That is the best vaccine you can have, better than any of the currently available vaccines. It not only protects you against corona, but also protects you against a wide variety of respiratory viral illnesses, tuberculosis, so on and so forth. So I think some of these measures that COVID has taught us should be with us to stay. And I'm sure we have been bruised and battered by COVID, especially the second wave, which was remarkably brutal, but will emerge victorious in the end of all of this. The government, the private sector, and most importantly, the citizens should work together for this to happen. Thank you very much. I once again congratulate News Trail, their editor Neena Gopal, their team of Kumaran and others, and wish them the very best. And I'm sure this is a paper that will be reading from tomorrow. Thank you very much.